We're about to launch into an exploration of a figure who didn't just act in American cinema, he fundamentally rewired it. Marlon Brando.
Born in 1924, died in 2004. I mean, his career spans 6 decades. It's this huge, complicated landscape of just revolutionary performances, incredible successes, but also some infamous flops.
And deep, often contradictory personal turmoil.
Right. And when you just look at the accolades, his status is undeniable. 2 Academy Awards, 3 BAFTAs, 2 Golden Globes. The awards prove the impact.
But our goal here, going through this stack of source material, is to get beyond the stats. We want to synthesize the career, the personal life, the intense controversies to really understand the man who, for all his fame, is still a total enigma.
Absolutely. And I think the central paradox, the thing we really have to track for you, is in his professional life.
He was a revolutionary. He was celebrated for bringing this gritty, authentic realism to the screen, a commitment that felt almost sacred.
But then, by the middle of his career, he was treating the entire profession with such open contempt that studios were, frankly, terrified of him.
So how did that happen? How does that firebrand rebel turn into the reluctant, often dismissive legend? That's what we need to figure out.
And to do that, you have to start with the tectonic shift he caused in acting itself. Brando is, rightly credited with being the one who brought the Stanislavski system, what we call method acting, to mainstream America. This was back in the 1940s.
The sources show he started his training at the dramatic workshop at the New School. That was under the German director Erwin Piscator.
Piscator was important, yes, but it was his mentor, Stella Adler, who really unlocked his potential. She defined his entire technique.
She was so instrumental because she taught him to use the Stanislavski system in a very specific way, to explore both the internal life and the external circumstances of a character to get to absolute realism.
It required imagination, observation. It forced the actor to really think about the character's world.
And we have to stop here for what is maybe the quintessential Brando anecdote. It just shows this innate insight he had from the very beginning.
The chicken story.
The chicken story. Adler would tell this story from a class exercise. She told the students, okay, act like chickens. And then she suddenly adds, a nuclear bomb is about to fall.
And most of the actors, understandably, they start running around, clucking, screaming in this big theatrical panic.
But not Brando. He just sits down, calmly, completely still, and pretends to lay an egg.
When Adler asked him what he was doing, why he wasn't panicking, his reply was just so simple. I'm a chicken. What do I know about bombs?
And that's it right there. That moment is the core difference. It's not about playing the emotion. It's about playing the reality of the character in their context.
A chicken doesn't understand nuclear war. So panic is illogical. That immediate, authentic grasp of character motivation is what set him apart from day one.
And that takes us directly to the context around the method itself. Because while we say method actor and think of Brando, it's so important to understand his loyalty was to Stella Adler. And he had this vehement, lifelong rejection of Lee Strasberg.
Oh, complete hostility. He viewed Strasberg, who ran the actor's studio, as an exploiter. He accused him of taking credit for the success of actors like himself, actors he'd barely even worked with.
And the sources are very clear. For Brando, Strasberg's version of the method, which was all about emotional recall, dredging up your own past trauma to fuel a performance, he saw that as damaging and, frankly, unnecessary.
He much preferred Adler's focus on imagination and external research.
And he didn't mince words. He said it plainly. Strasberg never taught me anything. Stella did, and later Kazan. It wasn't just a personal fight. It was a fundamental disagreement over the craft.
He wanted dialogue to feel like a real conversation. He rejected that formal, theatrical delivery of old Hollywood, which he said was like breakfast cereals, predictable, all the same. He wanted something raw.
So with this new technique, he starts his career in the mid-1940s. His first professional gig was in Summer Stock Theater in Sayville, New York.
And even in these very early roles, the pattern was already there. Erratic behavior, insubordination, all the things that would define his later career were visible from the start.
He actually got kicked out of a New School production for it. He was notoriously difficult, even when he was a complete unknown.
But the talent was so obvious, so unmistakable, that he was discovered almost immediately.
His official Broadway debut was in 1944, I Remember Mama, and he started getting recognized right away. He won back-to-back Theatre World Awards in 1946 for Candida and Truck Lane Cafe.
But the picture the sources paint is of an actor who is just magnetically talented, but also deeply disruptive.
And you see that perfectly during his tour with the legend Tallulah Bankhead in The Eagle Has Two Heads. That was in 1946.
Bankhead hired him even after a terrible audition because she saw the potential.
Mm.
But the clash of styles, it was immediate. She was a classic theatrical star, loud and formal.
And Brando, who saw in her heavy drinking and big personality a painful reminder of his own mother, he just delighted in provoking her.
The accounts are amazing. He would do these subtle things to sabotage her concentration, like scratching his crotch or picking his nose right before her big monologue.
It was pure rebel behavior, all to disrupt the formality he despised. He deliberately mumbled through a dress rehearsal, pushing the producer to a breaking point.
And when producer finally exploded, demanding Brando prove he could project his voice, Brando just unleashed the lines with his terrifying, powerful force.
And here's that insight again. Afterwards, when everyone was praising him for his power, a cast member overheard Brando just walk off stage and say, "They don't think you can act unless you can yell."
He just dismissed the praise. He saw it as superficial. Bankhead herself later said he was magnificent when he wanted to be, but often he was deliberately inaudible. It was all part of his devotion to naturalism.
The disruption was so bad that Bankhead fired him, but that was the best thing that could have happened to him because it made him available for the role that would change everything. Stanley Kowalski.
The pivotal moment. 1947, Tennessee Williams' Fascinate, a streetcar named Desire on Broadway, directed by Elia Kazan.
Williams was hesitant at first. Brando was technically too young for the part, but he was just captivated by his energy.
And Williams later wrote that casting a young Brando was key because it, and I'm quoting here, humanizes the character of Stanley in that it becomes the brutality and callousness of youth rather than a vicious old man.
It made the character more complicated, less of a cartoon villain, which is exactly what his training was all about.
And his preparation was already becoming legendary. He completely immersed himself in creating Kowalski, basing his movements, his mannerisms, on the boxer Rocky Graziano. He'd go to a local gym and just secretly study him.
And the proof is in Graziano's own reaction. He didn't know Brando had been watching him. He eventually went to see the play, and he just realized with total astonishment, on the stage is that son of a bitch from the gym, and he's playing me.
That's the ultimate validation, isn't it? Turning observation into a performance so real the source recognizes himself.
So that stage triumph naturally led to the screen. He reprised the role in the 1951 film, and that got him his first Academy Award nomination. This was the moment he shifted from Broadway star to cinematic rebel.
His film debut was actually the year before, in The Men, in 1950. He played a bitter paraplegic veteran.
And again, the commitment was just total. To prepare, he spent a full month living in a bed at a real army hospital, immersed himself completely in the physical reality of it.
But that physical prep had this really ironic, unintended consequence. Because of a pre-existing knee surgery, the changes his body went through while he was preparing for that role, it led the Army to upgrade his draft status.
He went from 4F, which is physically unfit, to 1A. Suddenly, he was eligible for the Korean War draft.
So he avoided service, but in classic Brando style. He showed up at the induction center and was deliberately difficult. He listed his race as human, his color as seasonal oyster weight to beige.
And he told the Army doctor he was psychoneurotic, claiming he had severe problems with authority, and that got him the deferment.
He followed that up quickly with Viva Zapata in 1952. Got his second Oscar nomination for playing Emiliano Zapata.
And the commitment continued. He secretly went to the actual Mexican town where Zapata lived, just to study the local speech patterns, the way people walked and moved. He wanted it to be authentic.
But this film also introduced some early tension, which was orchestrated by the director, Elia Kazan.
Brando noticed that his co-star, Anthony Quinn, who played his brother, was just incredibly cold to him the whole shoot.
It was years later that they both found out the truth. Kazan had intentionally told Quinn that Brando was unimpressed with his acting.
Just to create tension.
Just to enhance the on-screen rivalry between the two characters. It shows you the lengths Kazan would go to, even if it meant psychologically manipulating his own stars.
Then came the surprise move to classical drama. Julius Caesar in 1953. He played Mark Antony and got his third Oscar nomination.
And the casting drew huge skepticism. I mean, he was the mumbling method guy. People thought he was completely wrong for Shakespeare.
But he proved them all wrong, especially in that famous Friends, Romans, Countrymen speech. The director, John Huston, was reportedly just floored by the power he brought to it.
Houston said, Christ, it was like a furnace door opening. The heat came off the screen. It proved his technique could elevate anything.
But the film that truly made him the rebel icon of that era was The Wild One in 1953.
He rode his own Triumph motorcycle as Johnny Strabbler, the leader of this biker gang. The film was, well, it was controversial, criticized for violence.
But it fundamentally changed culture. It accidentally made Brando the emblem of the generation gap. It inspired fashion, music, attitude.
Leather jackets, sideburns, Triumph motorcycle sales for all of them just exploded.
And the character resonated so deeply because he just embodied this anti-establishment frustration. The critic Pauline Kael said he projected this image of someone who knew society was crap and was strong enough not to take the crap.
Brando himself felt it. He said that line where Johnny snarls, "Nobody tells me what to do,"
Yeah.
and Brando said that line captured exactly how he'd felt all my life.
So this period brings us to the absolute zenith of his early career, but also to a really crucial conflict that would define his future. His relationship with Elia Kazan and the film On the Waterfront.
Right, 1954. And Brando initially rejected the role of Terry Malloy.
He was furious with Kazan for cooperating with the House Committee on Un-American Activities during the Red Scare, for naming names. He saw it as a profound betrayal of his principles.
The role almost went to Frank Sinatra. But the producer, Sam Spiegel, managed to convince Brando to sign on, mostly by offering him a huge fee of $100,000.
Kazan, though, was determined to have him. He knew what Brando would bring to that character.
And the performance is just legendary. Most famously, that scene in the back of the car. I could have been a contender, with Rod Steiger playing his brother, Charlie.
The original script had Steiger holding a gun on him the whole time, keeping Brando's character fearful.
But Brando knew instinctively that this was false. He insisted on changing it. He argued that Terry, despite the danger, he would never believe his own brother would actually shoot him. He wouldn't be cowering in fear.
So instead, Brando just gently pushes the gun away. And that conveys this deep, wounded sadness, not physical fear. That subtle reproach, oh, Charlie. It's pure method insight.
Kazan was deeply impressed. He later said he wasn't sure if there was ever a better performance by a man in the history of American film.
And he won his first Best Actor Oscar for it. It cemented his stardom.
But here's the first real sign of that professional disillusionment. Even at his absolute peak, he was so dismissive of his own work. He said he felt like a huge failure after he saw the finished film.
This success marked the start of a period of huge hits in the mid-50s, but also the beginning of the end, in a way. The professional conflicts and missteps started to accelerate.
His first and last musical, Guys and Dolls in 1955, was a deeply uncomfortable experience for him.
He struggled with the singing a lot. He joked that he missed notes by extraordinary margins. The final version in the film is just countless takes spliced together.
And that was made worse by the famous rivalry with his co-star, Frank Sinatra.
Sinatra was a one-take guy. He perfected it, he did it, he moved on. And he hated Brando's method style, which required endless takes improvisation.
He famously called Brando the world's most overrated actor and, of course, mumbles. Their styles just clashed constantly on set.
He had other hits, like Sayonara in 1957. That got him another Oscar nomination, and it was a huge commercial success. He negotiated a deal for 10% of the gross, which made him a millionaire. But the real crisis was just around the corner.
And that crisis arrived with Mutiny on the Bounty in 1962. This film was the critical turning point. This is what earned him the reputation as the most difficult actor in Hollywood.
He was accused, with a lot of documentation, of deliberately sabotaging the massive production. His behavior caused constant delays, the director was fired, a new director was brought in, the budget doubled. It was a disaster.
The fallout was immediate. The Saturday Evening Post, which was one of the biggest magazines in America, ran this blistering article. The title was $6 Million Down the Drain. The Mutiny of Marlon Brando.
And that reputation just haunted him. Studios became genuinely afraid of hiring him. They feared his unpredictability, his demands, the financial ruin he might cause.
And this really marks the shift in Brando's attitude. He started to see acting purely as a means to an end, a way to make money to support his growing family and his lifestyle.
You can see that in his decision to sign a restrictive and ultimately really damaging 5-picture deal with Universal Studios in 1961.
Right before the Mutiny debacle. So that deal locked him into a series of just mediocre projects throughout the 1960s. This became the era of flops and disillusionment.
A time Brando himself summarized with a phrase that just captures it all: the fuck you years.
The list of failures in the 60s is long. Bedtime Story, The Appaloosa, a countess from Hong Kong, and the sources suggest he made a lot of these just to fulfill the contract, without his usual immersion or preparation.
A Countess from Hong Kong was especially disappointing for him. He found the director, the legendary Charlie Chaplin, to be incredibly authoritarian.
Chaplin demanded his actors follow his direction exactly. He'd demonstrate the physical movements he wanted, which, for Brando, the ultimate improviser, was just creatively stifling.
The critics were relentless. They attacked his commitment, his physical appearance. Pauline Kael wrote in 1966 that the rebel icon had devolved into a buffoon.
She said the man who was once strong enough to resist society's crap was now just shamelessly mocking his own reputation with indifferent performances.
And while Brando pretended not to care, the emotional cost was high. In the documentary Listen to Me, Marlon, using his private audio recordings, he confessed that the constant criticism hurt a lot.
There were a few bright spots, though. His portrayal of a repressed gay army officer in Reflections in a Golden Eye in '67 got critical praise.
And Brando himself said his favorite film was Burn from 1969, a very political film. He believed he did some of his best acting in it, even though it was a commercial failure.
But generally, by the start of the 1970s, the genius was considered unbankable by almost every major studio.
And that deep professional low point being seen as unbankable is the context for maybe the most extraordinary career comeback in Hollywood history. By 1970, he hadn't been a top 10 box office star in over a decade.
Which created this immense barrier to him being cast in The Godfather. Paramount executives were vehemently opposed. They listed his difficult reputation, his age, the string of expensive flops.
They even brought up his self-directed film, One-Eyed Jacks, as proof of his financial irresponsibility.
The director, Francis Ford Coppola, and the author, Mario Puzo, had to fight tooth and nail for him. The studio president, Stanley Jaffe, only gave in under 3 incredibly restrictive conditions.
They were designed to protect the studio. He had to accept a very low fee. He had to take financial responsibility for any delays he caused. And the big one, he had to do a screen test.
And that screen test became legend. Coppola, knowing Brando would never do a formal audition, convinced him to do a makeup test on videotape.
Brando improvised the look himself, famously stuffed cotton balls in his cheeks to get that jowly, puffed look.
The transformation was so total, so convincing. When the president of Paramount's parent company saw the tape, he was stunned. He asked, "What are we watching? Who is this old guinea?"
The test worked. Brando was signed for a shocking initial fee of just $50,000.
But that fee was a bit misleading. His contract included a percentage of the film's gross. But producer Robert Evans later claimed that Brando, who was desperate for cash, made a huge mistake. He sold those percentage points back to the studio for only $100,000.
Evans estimated that decision cost Brando over $11 million in profits.
It just speaks to his precarious financial situation and maybe his genuine disdain for the business side of things.
But on set, he was brilliant. He played the Don on screen and off. He used his influence to protect Coppola and the cast, especially Al Pacino, who the studio wanted to fire.
Brando threatened to walk off if Coppola was let go. It gave the director the freedom he needed.
And his approach to Vito Corleone was a masterclass in subtlety. He didn't want to play a shouting Al Capone stereotype. He wanted to play him as a gentleman, focusing on his kindness, his love for his family.
Which was a chilling contrast to his lethal authority in the criminal world. Robert Duvall said Brando would minimize the sense of beginning for the camera, just moving fluidly from casual conversation right into a deep performance.
He won his second Best Actor Oscar for the role, and the culmination of his activism came with his very public refusal of that award.
He became only the second actor ever to decline the Oscar. Instead of going, he sent Sachin Littlefeather, a young actress and activist.
She appeared in full Plains Indian-style regalia to decline the award on his behalf. It was a protest against the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry and what was happening at Wounded Knee at the time.
He had a longer written speech that she couldn't deliver because of time limits. It expressed hope that his refusal would focus attention on the rights of all people to remain free and independent. It was a huge political statement at the peak of his comeback.
And that momentum carried him right into one of his most complex and controversial roles, Paul in Bernardo Bertolucci's Last Tango in Paris.
The performance was lauded, but the film's sexual content and the way it was made, it sparked an uproar that really persists to this day.
On set, the famous Brando difficulty came back, but in a new way. This is when he fully embraced using cue cards. He just refused to memorize lines.
Crew members had to hide the cards all over the set, on walls, on other actors' bodies, on props.
Brando claimed it actually made his delivery feel more spontaneous, like the character was genuinely searching for the words, not reciting a script.
But we have to address the most sensitive part of this film, which is the lasting controversy around the non-consensual sexual encounter scene with the butter. The relationship is between Paul, an American widower, and Jean, a young Parisian woman played by Maria Schneider.
Maria Schneider later confirmed the act itself was simulated, but she was very emphatic that she was not told what the scene would include until right before they filmed. She didn't have the opportunity to consent to the specific nature of it.
And you feel for her, because she said she felt violated, manipulated by that directorial decision. We have immense sympathy for what she experienced on that set.
It's crucial to understand, though, that Brando himself, who was 48 at the time, also felt deeply manipulated by the process, according to Schneider's own account.
Right. Brando confirmed the sexual content was simulated, but the emotional cost for him was enormous. He was so distraught by the environment Bertolucci created that he refused to speak to him for 15 years after the film wrapped.
Despite all the ethical issues and censorship battles, the film was a massive hit. It earned Brando another $3 million and his 7th Oscar nomination.
That financial success then helped propel him to his final, big, epic role of the decade. Colonel Walter E. Kurtz in Coppola's Apocalypse Now, a production that has become the stuff of legend.
He commanded an astronomical fee, $1 million a week for just 3 weeks of work.
But the production was plagued with problems, as documented in the Hearts of Darkness documentary. Brando showed up on set severely overweight, which Coppola hadn't expected, and he admitted he hadn't even read the source book, Heart of Darkness.
Coppola was desperate. He'd invested everything in the film, so since Brando was shy about his weight, Coppola devised this brilliant solution. He portrayed Kurtz as a man who had indulged every aspect of himself, intellectually, morally, and physically.
And he hid Brando's figure by shooting him almost entirely in deep shadows and tight close-ups.
Brando, true to form, maximized his financial gain. The delays in creative discussions stretched his time on set way past the original 3 weeks. He and Coppola spent days just discussing the character's philosophy, all while Brando was getting paid by the week. He ended up earning around $9 million for that brief but iconic role.
And the film was critically acclaimed. Brando's whispered final words, "The horror, the horror." They instantly became part of cinema history. That role really closed the book on his most commercially successful but also most tumultuous decade.
So while his professional life stabilized for a bit in the 70s, his private life was perpetually complex. He was married 3 times to Anna Karshfi, Movida Castaneda, and Tarita Teripaya.
And he officially fathered at least 11 children, 3 of whom were adopted.
His relationship with Movida Castaneda was later annulled when it came out she was still legally married to someone else. And his final wife, Tarita Teripaya, was an actress he met on the set of Mutiny on the Bounty.
He also had high-profile relationships. A notable one was an intermittent affair with Marilyn Monroe and a particularly troubled, explosive relationship with the actress Rita Moreno in the 50s.
Moreno spoke openly later about the emotional abuse she suffered. She talked about Brando throwing chairs in a jealous rage. She also revealed that when she became pregnant, Brando arranged an abortion that was tragically botched.
And later, when he moved on to Tarita Terapihaya, Moreno attempted suicide by overdosing on his sleeping pills.
The sources also confirm his fluid sexuality. He was openly bisexual. He told a French journalist in 1976 that he'd had homosexual experiences, and I am not ashamed.
But maybe his most enduring bond was his close friendship with the actor Wally Cox, whom he'd met as a child. Brando described their bond beautifully. He said, "If Wally had been a woman, I would have married him and we would have lived happily ever after."
And that connection continued even after Cox died in 1973. Brando famously struggled with the loss and took possession of Cox's ashes, keeping them for 2 decades.
Cox's widow eventually agreed to let him keep them, believing he needed them more than she did. After Brando's own death, their ashes were scattered together, partly in Tahiti and partly in Death Valley.
And speaking of Tahiti, the disaster of Mutiny on the Bounty inadvertently gave Brando a refuge. He fell in love with the islands, and he bought the 12-island atoll of Tetiaroa.
He turned it into an environmental laboratory for ecological research. It eventually became the Brando Resort. His dedication to privacy there was intense. He even became a ham radio operator under a pseudonym, Marlon Brando, to communicate securely.
Brando's commitment to social justice was just as fiery as his performances, and it started long before the Oscar protest. He was a dedicated supporter of the civil rights movement.
He was at the March on Washington in 1963 alongside Harry Belafonte and Charlton Heston. He participated in the Freedom Rides and gave a lot of financial support to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
His activism for Native American rights was also very strong. In 1964, he was arrested at a fish-in protest in Washington state, advocating for treaty rights. So that Oscar refusal in '73 wasn't an isolated thing, it was part of a lifelong commitment.
He also took a strong stance against apartheid in South Africa, favoring a boycott of his own films there. And he later starred, for free, in the 1989 film A Dry White Season, to further the anti-apartheid cause.
Now, in line with the sources, we do have to address some highly controversial public comments Brando made later in his life regarding Jewish influence in Hollywood.
Right. He made these statements in two very visible places. A 1979 Playboy interview and then again on Larry King Live in 1996. He made comments suggesting that Jewish people were watchful over how they were portrayed on screen, ensuring positive representation, while other groups were consistently besmirched.
It's essential we report these statements impartially, as they are in the historical record and the source material. After the 1996 broadcast, his Jewish agent, Jay Cantor, publicly defended him.
He stated that Brando had often expressed his deep fondness for the Jewish people and was a known supporter of Israel. We're relaying this information strictly as it's reported in the provided sources, maintaining impartiality.
After he officially retired in 1980, Brando would come back to acting every so often, usually driven by financial need or a political cause.
His free appearance in A Dry White Season in '89 earned him another Oscar nomination and the Best Actor award at the Tokyo Film Festival, even though he later publicly disapproved of how the director had edited the film.
He had one last big moment of critical and commercial success with The Freshman in 1990. He did this expert self-parody of his Vito Corleone character.
Critics raved. Roger Ebert wrote that no star had ever repeated a triumph as successfully as Brando did in that role.
But unfortunately, that high point was followed by a final sharp decline. It was marked by Razzie Award nominations for Worst Supporting Actor.
For films like Christopher Columbus, the discovery and the very troubled production of The Island of Dr. Moreau in 1996.
The chaos on the Moreau set was notorious. The screenwriter claimed Brando actively sabotaged the film by refusing to cooperate.
His last completed film was The Score in 2001 with Robert De Niro. But by the late 90s, his extreme obesity, weighing well over 300 pounds, it overshadowed his final professional efforts.
In his final years, though, his eccentric brilliance still surfaced. He devoted time to developing and patenting new ways to tension drumheads. Just this surprising technical curiosity.
He also had a very close and unusual friendship with Michael Jackson. Jackson provided a lot of support, inviting Brando to stay for weeks at Neverland Ranch.
Because of Brando's failing health, he had pulmonary fibrosis and needed constant oxygen. Jackson got him a customized golf cart with a portable oxygen tank so he could still explore the grounds.
Brando's son, Miko, later confirmed how deep that friendship was. He said the last time his father left his house to spend any real time anywhere, it was with Michael Jackson.
Marlon Brando died on July 1st, 2004 at the age of 80. The cause of death was respiratory failure.
And in a final, fitting example of his commitment, the sources show that shortly before his death, despite needing an oxygen mask, he recorded his voice for the Godfather video game.
He could only record a single line because of his health, which they used in the final game as a tribute. And as we said, his ashes were later scattered with Wally Cox's.
The cultural influence he had is just monumental. It's permanent. The American Film Institute lists him as the fourth greatest male star of classic American cinema, and Time magazine called him the actor of the century in 1998.
His image from The Wild One is still the definitive icon of youth rebellion. The leather jacket, the sideburns, the attitude, it's all part of the global consciousness.
And he wasn't just a male sex symbol. He was also recognized as an early lesbian icon, influencing the Bush look in the 1950s.
His work is part of America's lexicon. The line, "I could have been a contender," is instantly understood. His influence on music is everywhere. From Bruce Springsteen singing "I Could Walk Like Brando" to Bob Dylan referencing the Godfather Brando.
That rebel image was so pervasive that Honda launched their famous "You Meet the Nicest People on a Honda" campaign, specifically to combat the outlaw image motorcycles got from the Wild One.
His revolutionary contributions to acting changed everything. He brought a sense of gritty, painful realism that altered what audiences expected from an emotional performance on screen.
But we have to remember the limits he saw in his own method. He admitted that while it worked wonders for contemporary drama, it failed him for classical stuff like Shakespeare, where you cannot mumble, you need a different discipline.
Which brings us back one last time to that great paradox that defined him. Brando confessed that his complicated, painful childhood, his emotional insecurity, his search for love at all, helped him as an actor. It fueled his intensity.
But he also admitted that authenticity came at a devastating personal cost. He never went back to the stage after his first Broadway success because the emotional demands were just too much.
He described performing Stanley Kowalski 8 times a week as an emotional grind, forcing himself to yell, scream, cry, and relive those wrenching emotions over and over.
So, considering how his whole revolutionary approach relied on digging into that raw, painful, emotional truth, the sources really compel us to ask this final provocative question for you to consider. Does the life story of Marlon Brando suggest that the pursuit of profound creative influence, when it's based on personal emotional truth, ultimately comes at the insurmountable cost of personal happiness and professional consistency?
Thanks for listening.